A toddler reaches toward a stranger's dog before the parent can stop them. An adult, alone in a forest, sees a deer standing still and feels an almost physical urge to walk closer and touch it. Someone visiting a zoo stares at a sleeping lion through reinforced glass and thinks, just for a second, about reaching through anyway. None of this is trained behavior. Nobody teaches a 2-year-old to want to touch a puppy's fur. The impulse shows up on its own, and it shows up early, which means it's worth asking where it actually comes from. Start with the hand itself. Human hands are unusually well built for gathering information through touch. The fingertips alone contain thousands of touch receptors packed into a small area, more densely than almost anywhere else on the body except the lips. Compare that to a lion's paw, built almost entirely for force, or a bird's wing, built for lift. Human hands evolved less for power and more for sensing texture, temperature, shape, and resistance, because for most of our history, touching things accurately was how you figured out whether they were safe to eat, dangerous to handle, or useful as a tool. That instinct didn't disappear just because supermarkets exist now. It just lost its original job and started looking for new things to investigate. Soft, warm, and round are doing a lot of the work here. Researchers studying tactile preference have found that humans rate soft, rounded, warm objects as more pleasant to touch than hard, angular, cold ones, almost universally, across cultures with very little else in common. That preference connects to something deeper than aesthetics. Soft and warm describes most healthy newborn mammals. Sharp, cold, and rigid describes most things that can hurt you. A brain wired to seek out the first category and avoid the second was, for most of human history, a brain less likely to get injured or to neglect something that needed care. Fur sits right in the center of that preference. It's warm. It moves slightly under your hand. It has texture without sharp edges. Stroke a cat and your body actually responds physiologically, not just emotionally. Studies on petting animals have recorded measurable drops in cortisol, the body's main stress hormone, along with small reductions in blood pressure, often within minutes. Some research has tracked an oxytocin release in both the human and the animal during gentle mutual contact, the same hormone connected to bonding between parents and infants. The body isn't pretending to feel calmer. It's running an actual chemical process that happens to feel good. And feeling good is usually evolution's way of making you repeat a behavior. This connects to something we covered in an earlier video about why human babies are born so helpless and dependent. A species that has to invest over a decade raising a single child needs a powerful built-in reward system for caregiving behavior, or exhausted parents would eventually stop bothering. Gentle touch is part of that system. It's not limited to your own offspring either. The same circuitry that rewards a parent for holding a newborn appears to fire, at a smaller scale, when an adult holds a kitten, a puppy, or even a stuffed animal with the right proportions. Evolution built a general-purpose nurturing reflex, not a narrowly targeted one, and that reflex doesn't always check whether the animal in front of you actually needs your help. That's part of why people reach toward lions, bears, and other animals clearly capable of killing them. The visual cues that trigger the nurturing reflex, rounded face, big eyes, soft-looking fur, don't come with a built-in danger warning. A juvenile lion and a golden retriever can trigger a remarkably similar response in the part of the brain processing soft and approachable, even though only one of them belongs anywhere near your hand. If you watched the video about how ancient humans found partners, you already know touch carried enormous social weight in early human groups, signaling trust, comfort, and connection long before language carried most of that load. Grooming behavior shows up across nearly every primate species for exactly this reason. Chimpanzees spend hours each day picking through each other's fur, not purely for hygiene, but because the physical contact maintains social bonds and reduces tension within the group. Human touch likely evolved from the same root system. We just lost most of our fur and kept the underlying urge to make physical contact as a way of expressing affection and forming trust. If you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person this channel was built for, so go ahead and subscribe before the next one drops. There's also a much simpler explanation running underneath all of this. Curiosity about texture itself. Children reach toward unfamiliar materials constantly, not specifically animals, but anything novel: sand, water, slime, bark, fur. Developmental psychologists studying infant behavior have found that touch is one of the primary ways young children build a mental model of the physical world, often before language develops enough to ask questions about it. An animal covered in fur represents a genuinely unfamiliar texture compared to almost everything else a child encounters indoors, which may explain why the urge to touch animals often peaks dramatically in early childhood and only partially fades with age. It doesn't fully disappear in adults either, which says something interesting about how much conscious control we actually have over this. Most adults know intellectually that reaching into an enclosure at a zoo is a bad idea. The urge can still show up anyway, because it isn't really coming from the reasoning part of the brain. It's coming from something closer to instinct, something formed long before language, logic, or zoo safety signage existed. Some animals seem to actively benefit from this dynamic, and not by accident. Cats are notably good at producing the exact features that trigger human nurturing responses: large eyes relative to face size, soft rounded features, a purr that sits in a frequency range humans find calming rather than alarming. None of that happened purely by chance. Animals that more effectively triggered human affection were more likely to be fed, sheltered, and protected throughout history, which means the animals best at exploiting this specific human instinct were also the ones most likely to survive and reproduce alongside us. In a strange sense, your hands have been running the same basic program for hundreds of thousands of years. Reach toward what feels safe, soft, and warm. Hold on to what seems worth protecting. Most of the time, that instinct works exactly the way it was designed to. Once in a while, it walks you right up to the edge of a lion enclosure and asks you to ignore every warning sign in front of you. So which animal gets you every single time, no matter how many times you've been told not to touch it? Drop it in the comments, and if you know someone who absolutely cannot resist petting every dog they pass on the street, send them this video.